Hello, my name is Tabs, and welcome to episode 86 of the Growth Podcast. Look, I hope you're all doing really well and enjoying a few Arsenal men's free day during the international break. So, in this episode, as there is no football to talk about, we are doing another one in our series of meeting members of the Arsenal online community. This is where we're sort of meeting Arsenal fans that you've either heard from on podcasts or read their blogs or followed on the socials. And we like to sort of delve in and get to know these folks a bit better, get to know about them and their love of Arsenal. But before we meet our guest today, helping me co-host is Ian, also known as ArsenalVision, who's actually a former interviewee, and he was in fact our inaugural guest on these community casts. So, Ian, how are you doing, and how's your life changed since appearing on the Growth Podcast?
I'm good, Tabs. I tell you, there's hordes of women and men outside my house here. But yeah, I'm good. I've enjoyed the interlull so far. We had St. Patrick's Day here. I played a few gigs. We're always very busy around St. Patrick's Day, getting the money ready to pay for next season's season ticket. But yeah, I've been good. I'm happy that we finished our last league game was a win, and because if we had not beaten Chelsea, it would have been quite an awkward interlull. So yeah, all good, happy. And I'm very excited about today's pod, I have to say.
Indeed. And yes, you're right. It would have been a bit of a sour couple of weeks having to digest losing to Chelsea, which is never fun. But luckily we haven't lost to them about 7-8 games. So who knows? Anyway, so look, we've been fortunate enough to talk with some great Arsenal fans on this pod, and I said, like yourself, we've had She War, we've had North Banksy, Gooner Dave and his book, The Gooniverse, and we even had Elliot Smith. I think some people might have heard of him, also known as Yankee Gunner from the ArsenalVision podcast. So. And look, you can go and find those in our back catalogue. But today we've got another very, very special guest, and we're really pleased to have him on. Someone both Ian and I listen to and enjoy listening to and follow on the socials. And he's someone that often provides an alternative left field opinion on Arsenal at times. He's a fixture on what I would consider the best Arsenal podcast out there, including our one. And I'd like to offer a very special woohoo welcome to Paul Cassidy, also known as Poz from the ArsenalVision podcast. Paul, how are you doing?
Woohoo!
Love it. Is it Paul or Poz? What should we do? What should we call you?
Whatever's most comfortable for you. I don't mind either way.
Okay, well, we might interchange. So look, we really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you for taking your time. And so that, a few questions about your background, who you are, your love for Arsenal, and so on. So before we get onto that, we just wanted to find out what's in a name, and I did a bit of a web search on Paul Poznan in my pants Cassidy. And did you know you can fly from Cassidy in British Columbia to Poznan in Poland, which is about 5,000 miles for about $800. There's also a Scottish actor known for his expressive features and unique physical acting approach. And then there's a Gaelic footballer who plays for, now you might be able to help me, Bellaghy Wolftones? Bellaghy Wolftones and Derry. And there's also a pretty well-constructed model from Slovakia. So are you familiar with any of those, Poz?
Yeah, she's probably a close relative. Sounds like it by, clearly some physical similarities there. So the name, the physical similarities, probably a cousin.
Indeed. Okay, so look, just before we get into the meat of today's, for people who don't know, the Growth Podcast is a podcast that's been going for about a year now, and it's started up by your everyday Arsenal fans who just wanted to sort of chat about going to games, go to the club and going to matches. It's not quite as in-depth on the analysis as others, but it's a bit more about that match day experience and just the lives and loves of being an Arsenal fan. So that's who we are. And if you want to listen to us, you can go and find us on the usual channels. So I'll over to Ian, who's going to kick things off in a section we'd like to call Who Are Ya? Who Are Ya?
Who are you? Who are you? Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much, Tabs. And again, absolute pleasure to have you on, Poz. I've been a long time listener to you guys on the ArsenalVision podcast. So today we're going to get to know you a lot better, we hope. So, you are from Ireland. And as we all know, all the best Arsenal podcasters are Irish. So tell our listeners, where in Ireland are you from? And what led you to make the big move over to the USA? You're living in the USA now. So
yeah. From Dublin, Rathmines.
Oh, I see.
Which is about 3 miles south of the centre of Dublin. So born and raised there. Went to St. Mary's College, and lived in Dublin for my first 24 or so years on the planet. Then I moved to England for 5 years, living in the Midlands area there. I did an engineering degree and went into... I joined IBM, actually, first company I worked for, and decided I was not the world's greatest and most talented engineer, did not want to travel in any car I might have designed or fly in any plane I might have done some componentry on. Decided that the biggest, like they say, find a mission, make the world better. Sometimes your mission is to not make the world worse. Are we still connected there, guys? We all good?
Yeah,
Came back.
you're
Yeah.
still there. Yeah.
So a little blip there. So I did the world a favor and myself.
So were you involved in creating Zencaster? So I've just
I was not. But had I been, I would have taken myself out of the team and moved to sales. So basically, I moved. I thought, let's bullshit about the capabilities of a company rather than be the part of the central trust of forming the capabilities of a company. So yeah, I got into sales early on, technical sales, and basically worked in the UK for about 5 years, and then I had an opportunity to move to the US, which I took. I think I always had it in my mind that I'd move to the US for... I didn't really come up with a plan, but kind of felt like, I'll go for 3 or 4 years, experience that, and then onto that. Well, 3 became 30, so still here. Yep.
30 years. And where,
So where
with
is-
the 5 years in London, where were you living there? Or sorry, the 5 years in the UK, where were you living?
Yeah. Leamington Spa, Warwick, Coventry, Midlands area, basically, about a mile and a half, an hour and a half up the M1, M6, M40, kind of that area up there.
Area. Very good. And where in the US are you now, for those who don't know?
Chicago. Yeah,
very
about
nice.
6 miles north of downtown, near Wrigley Field, Wrigleyville area. Just people still won't know where that is, but it feels like you're homing in on where I live. But yeah, the home of the Cubs. So
look out your window. We have the drone outside now.
Yeah.
I might have run past your house last year.
Yeah, you might well have, because there's the Lakeshore Path along there, along Lake Michigan. Oddly enough, I know I'm in Illinois, but apparently they claim the whole lake, both sides of it. So we're right up against Lake Michigan. There's a really nice running path, running trail there, and I would be big into running if I had the time to do any running. But yeah, I'm a runner.
I was there for the marathon last.
Oh wow,
October. So yeah, it was
and
really
you didn't
cool.
Look me up. You bastard.
No, sorry, mate. Sorry, I didn't feel it was appropriate. But now I will. Now that we've met for all of 5 minutes,
town, and then you sloped off again.
I'm just very good at eating marathons, or Snickers as they are known now. Yeah.
Okay. Good man. Good choice.
Very good. So there's no fear of you ever going back to the homeland in any time soon, I guess.
Not really. I mean, me personally, yeah, but my wife's French, our daughter's American. It's like, yeah, but I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, it would be it'd be a tough thing to bring home. Yeah, like it's incredible the passage you've taken to go over there, and so in the lead up to all of that, tell everybody, how did you become an Arsenal fan? Like, who or what got you into supporting Arsenal, and how long have you been supporting the Arsenal?
Since 1971. I was 7-year-old. As I look back on it and reflect upon it, I was apparently a 7-year-old trophy whore. We won the FA Cup.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think I have no idea, but here's how I remember it: that I was like, you got to be rooting for a team in the FA Cup when it's on you. You're a 7-year-old. You're going to have a side, and I'd already picked Arsenal. I think I liked the shirts. I think I liked the red with the white, the white shoulders, and look cooler than sometimes get the two finals mixed up in the 70s in terms of teams. But it was Liverpool, and they just had the they had the monotone red that season. I don't know if I knew that as a 7-year-old, but anyway, the two color with Arsenal, the
The white
shirts were
sleeve
cool.
stood out.
Yeah, the Charlie George goal. It was like early 70s, and he looked like early 70s, and he just had the vibe of it. He was super. You look back and you think, I guess everybody looked like that, but look at the other footballers. They didn't all look like that. He was the 70s. They were the 60s. Everybody else on the pitch was the 60s. He was the guy who scored, as I remember, a screamer, uh, an impossible shot that goes in kind of near post. Basically, just feckin' leathered it and it went in. But anyway, uh, I thought it was pure genius, and I was over the moon. And then you go into school and everybody's like, oh, these guys are Manchester United, and these. I learned to hate Manchester United supporters right from the get go. I can remember, like, one of the deepest emotions that you can't really access is like disgust, disdain. I didn't know I was supposed to hate Tottenham Hotspur. They seemed harmless enough, There was nothing
Yeah,
much. Uh,
yeah,
and in fact, over the years, like for years, I never knew I was supposed to hate Spurs, and I didn't. I quite liked watching Spurs. They had like fun players, and so they were never going to win anything. Don't get me wrong, but they had some classy players, foreign players, this, that, they had real flair players, and they were kind of fun,
yeah.
harmless, weren't
It,
hurting
it, it,
anybody.
it, it, it's interesting you say that, because I'm exactly the same. Coming from Ireland, it was Liverpool, it was Man United that you
Yeah,
grew up to hate. They were all your friends who you
yeah.
who you grew up with, who they all supported those teams, and Spurs like weren't on the complete hatred radar. You had to build up that hatred over time. I think, yeah,
Yeah, nobody told me. Nobody told me I
yeah,
was supposed to hate them.
yeah, yeah,
And very like, so here's a funny one. So the CEO of our company is a Liverpool supporter, so he's been ribbing me for a while, and the co-founder is a Man United supporter, and like I'm more into the football than they are because they're busy actually running a company, um, and I don't. I just play a bit role in it, so I have the time to be both. But anyway, they rib me on it. And the next thing they tell me, I have a new boss. I'm like, oh, great. A layer between me and them. Thank God I'll get a new boss. Turns out he's English. Turns out he is the most Spursy Spurs supporter you've ever met. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Do they pick this just to. Anyway, so
just
he's
to wind you up.
quite. Yeah, it started off a bit rough on the. I mean, we got on good, but once we got to the football thing, there was a bit of tension there. I'll be honest. And then over time, I'm like, especially, well, look, it's this season, and they've gone from being looking like they might be quite good at the start to very quickly being crap, and again, and so that's made it quite easy. But it's changed how I feel about Spurs, at least for this season. I wince a bit when things are going really bad for them because, like, my poor boss, and like, not that we're having our best ever season, but like, yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's still hardcore in me that they are the people I most despise. They're the people I most enjoy taking the piss out of when they think they're good and they're almost good. But when they're bad, I don't feel like it. Almost feels like bullying the little guy. You're a 15-year-old, and on the playground there's a 11-year-old annoying twerp. It's like I'm not going to do anything with them. I might give him a little
It's too
nudge, a
easy.
little.
It's too easy in a target. Yeah,
Where's
sometimes.
the
But
glory in that?
isn't that even worse? Like indifference. They want to be hated by us. If we show them
Yeah,
indifference, it's like you actually don't mean anything to us. So that's even actually
yeah.
even worse than be
Well, I think
hated
there's
and
one worse:
just
pity. It's
Yeah,
like,
pity. Yeah.
and if they know that we've got to the point where we pity them, that's got to
uh,
be the worst. Arsenal pity us? Jesus, how bad must we be? But I
And
never lack hatred for a couple of other clubs. I like Liverpool. I've always liked Liverpool, and if I wasn't an Arsenal supporter, I would have been. And there was an Irish connection. There always has been there. You kind of have that sense. Um, but United, I've always fucking hated United, and
yeah,
Chelsea. Chelsea didn't matter, and they were like they were never very good. They were never really very anything. They were basically a kind of a West Ham, and then
yeah,
Abramovich shows up, and instantly he solved my "who do I hate" problem. Mourinho, him, like, and they live up to they confirm who you think they are every year, every season. I absolutely fucking hate that club.
Do not
That
get me
one's
Yeah.
easy.
started on Chelsea. Do
Yeah.
not get
Yeah.
me started.
Tabs, his head's going to explode now if we start talking too much about Chelsea. But it is true, and you know what? You described it perfectly there, Paz. Like Chelsea were basically West Ham until the money showed up. It was they were an irrelevance. Even
They'd
less so.
occasionally have a good player and
Yeah,
but they weren't a factor. They weren't, they were a planet far off in the solar system spinning around. Like they weren't relevant. They weren't in where the action was. So
yeah, they were
yeah,
never.
they were
And
nothing.
over here in Ireland, they were. You would have to travel far to find a Chelsea fan as well. So they weren't on your radar in terms of friends
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think there was like one guy. We had probably 30 kids in our class. There was one guy who was a Chelsea supporter. There was like one, two, maybe a Tottenham supporter, and you're like, it seemed like an oddity of
yeah.
personality that you were like how.
Back then it was a case when somebody said I'm a Chelsea fan, you'd be like, why? You can
Yeah,
understand it now why you'd have Chelsea fans, but back then it was like that makes no sense. Why?
makes no sense. Yeah,
Yeah, and you touched on the Irish connection with Liverpool, and obviously there's a huge Irish connection in terms of players with Arsenal. What
yeah,
have they meant to you over the years? What have they done for you in terms of your love for Arsenal?
yeah. No, so it was easy to love them in '71 because they won the FA Cup, and English football did not project. It was very parochial. So basically, there was the FA Cup, the league. You didn't really see unless you watched Match of the Day in the evenings, and Match of the Day was honestly it was crap. It was like a couple of minutes of any team, and it's like it just didn't pull you in. So, it did a very poor job of pulling you into the sport. So it was pretty hard to support your team back in the day.
Yeah,
By '79, we had Irish players. We had Liam Brady. We had a bunch of guys, and then late '70s, early '80s. There was one point I remember we had you could count 6, 7 players in the team who were Irish between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And it just of course, it pulled you more and more into it. But
yeah,
I'm not going to bullshit anybody that I've always been this, totally football Arsenal focused. But it was really hard to follow football. Like they worked against it. The English football worked against it, and when Italian football was the thing on, I don't know if it was Channel 4 or whatever. I think it was
yeah,
Channel 4 had the Italian football. It was great, and it was accessible, and it was open to it was English people doing this. That should tell you something, right? But there was this
yeah,
huge market for Italian football because Italian football was opening itself to the world. It had so I was watching Italian. It was like it was fun. It was open. And my access to my club just wasn't there. So I was worrying about it. I was not I had a cousin who'd open the newspaper and he'd be going down and he'd be looking at the league table and the results. And I'd be like, that's not very exciting.
yeah,
But that was
yeah,
your access to your I didn't know what Arsenal was doing during the league.
yeah,
It was almost kind of a lost decade where you'd have the good fortune to tune in with something or not
yeah.
if they got anywhere in the later rounds of the FA Cup. It was really bloody tough.
And CFAX became a
Yeah,
thing then. That's how you kept kept in touch. For the younger listeners, we won't even go into that because that's a whole different. You could do a
yeah.
podcast
Look
on
it up on
CFAX alone.
YouTube. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, how many
Um,
exciting days
and,
I had.
and then there was the football pools and the guy saying Bolton Wanderers 3, and I'd be always be guessing what the second score was based on the tone of the
Oh yes,
like.
yeah.
So there was a whole
Very good.
culture around football, but your access to your actual club. So
Yeah,
I just tuned in when it was there, and I didn't I was young. I had lots of stuff going, and even in my 20s, I was uh, I wanted to meet girls and hang out with my mates, and again, access was terrible. So I only I'm not going to bullshit people. I only really fully connected with the club at times when they were in the media, when they were on it, when they'd gone deep in the FA Cup, when for some reason there was a lot of coverage of them because there were Irish players in it. And like there were lost seasons there for me, honestly. I was doing other things, and it's like you can't invent a fictional relationship with something. It was like
Yeah.
it might as well be on in the Soviet Union. I don't know what the
Yeah,
fuck they were up to.
you're
So
100% right,
parochial.
because you didn't have access to it. Like the people today are so spoiled with the access,
Yeah,
just in terms of it, of the live games. Then like each club has their own, social media, has their own YouTube channels. There's so much out there. You really had to go far to find somewhere that would show even a little part, as you say, only a couple of minutes on Match of the Day. Back then it was such a different world. It really was.
it
Yeah.
was crap. Such a disservice to themselves. And then like I totally get the Premier. I don't know what their motives of it were for the Premier League, but it was opening up the league to the world, basically.
Yeah.
Talk about a reversal of the first division to the Premier League, and
Yeah.
like everything changed. Now I was in the US, so it took a couple of years for everything to change for me. But already you had a sense that this league had opened itself to the world, and like the players were becoming famous somewhat well known in America. Starting to word was getting out there, and you started having access. And as soon as I started having access, I got totally pulled back into it, and
Yeah.
Arsenal and where they were at. And my wife's French, and the manager was French, and half the team was French, and it was great. It was
It was
fantastic.
perfect. And speaking of, social media and all the access that we have nowadays, tell me about the incredibly successful Arsenal Vision podcast. First of all, how did you find yourself getting involved? How did you become a regular on that? And what do you think has made the Arsenal Vision podcast such a massive success? It's the pinnacle of Arsenal fan media, amongst others. Tell us about your journey there.
Yeah, well, it was easy to become a part of it because we founded it. So it was, it was me.
Good answer.
Yeah, me and Elliot, and we were working with another chap for a bit, and it just didn't quite, chemistry wise, didn't quite click, and it was kind of, are we enjoying this? Is this fun? And I had read a Beatles book. I probably read it afterwards, but you reinvent your story, don't you? I'd read a Beatles
Yes.
book around that time, but it was actually afterwards, and it was about how it was kind of the story of when they kicked Pete Best, the drummer, out of the band and got the drummer they really wanted, which was Ringo, and like things were coming apart, and then suddenly it was this thing where the vibe was right and the vibe was wrong. And no, because I remember I ended up talking to him and to let him know that we were going in a different direction. And I remember that in the background we were like, it's very tough because you start something and you're like, friends are friendly. We didn't actually
Yeah.
know each other before, but you were starting to build kind of and it's just person to person. It was very, people don't like that interaction where you're kind of saying we're going in a different direction. It's not you, it's us.
You
But
took
we
the
got to
words
go
out
in
of
a
my
different
mouth. I
direction.
was about to say.
Yeah. So, but I actually remember now because we were talking about it in the background, and I kept on about the Beatles, which I know is getting a little ahead of ourselves, a little perhaps aggrandizing our importance in the sphere of social importance. But
I don't know. Maybe amongst Arsenal fans, you're more popular than Jesus. But we'll see.
then Jesus at the moment, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Definitely than Jesus. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my working model. You got to get the chemistry right, and like the Beatles are only the Beatles because Ringo, right? Not the greatest drummer in the world. As they quip themselves, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles. Said, I think,
Yeah.
who said that? Either probably
I think
Lennon because he
I
was the
think
most
John Lennon said
acerbic.
it. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
was.
It was also kind of true, and there were time he would get upset because he'd leave the studio and they'd have an argument, and he'd come back and they'd filled in the track for him, and it would either be McCartney or Lennon had done the drumming for him, and so yeah, we felt we needed to go in a different direction. Tim was already starting to become part of it. I wouldn't say he was nailed down as you know, that was his thing from a podcasting standpoint. He was still a bit of a butterfly, but starting to become part of the picture. So he's part of the discussions. And then we got Clive on once and twice, and by the time we'd had him on twice, we were like, Clive, what would you? We were kind of trying folks out to see what would you think about. It was very funny because we used to argue a lot, right, on the podcast, especially me and Elliot, and Tim would take a step back, like we'd really go at each other. And Clive had this thing. He said that he wasn't sure about getting involved because he's involved in this other podcast, and he wasn't loving it because basically they would take his views, having argued with him, and then the next week they'd be going forward with his opinions,
stealing his
no
ideas.
recognition. Yeah, effectively having done him dirty, they're then like taking his positions. He just felt there was something wrong there, and he didn't like the. And I said to him, I wouldn't worry about that. We're so in love with our own positions. We like, have we lived up to that or what? I mean, we're very wedded to our positions. It doesn't matter how great or how right the other person is. You kind of you have your feeling. We do change, we do evolve and stuff, but man, we love our opinions. So that has not turned out to be the problem that Clive feared it might once be. And basically, once we got the four of us, we had our Beatles. The chemistry was good. Now, none of us, Tim and Clive would have known each other. And I think Clive becoming part of it was probably a large part of Tim. Even Tim probably suggested it. I don't remember. But the fact that Clive had that basis with Tim just from being in the Arsenal match daying community, and both having been on Arsblog. And look, my favorite podcast of all is the Arscast, and I don't say that because we're friends. Like, it just is. That's my go-to, and it was a touchstone for many people, and it was the connection between Tim and Clive in many ways. So it all flows back to there. It's still the podcast that my comfort food, and my my favorite preparation for our podcast is listening to their podcast. And again, back to the thing, I still come away with it like I'm still arguing with them in my head while the podcast is on, or forming my version of their opinion. It's like, it's great for me to get to jazz me up to what I think about what I think about. I love it.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of
It's
sense, that.
incredible, and that's brilliant insight. I didn't realize that you were involved in the forming of it, and to hear how it came together is incredible. Because, like, Tabs will agree that we're staunch listeners, as well as with Arseblog as well, and the Arsecast, as you say. No, fair play. That's brilliant insight. And I have to ask, you said it at the top of the show. Your famous woohoo. Where did that
Yeah.
come from? Because podcast intros are a thing. All the guys have one. Name any podcast, and they all have an intro. Where did your woohoo come from?
Yeah, so that was one of my things at this. So one of the Beatles things was to be the best little rock and roll band in the world. So that was my mantra for the podcast to start with. So we just wanted a really good podcast that we really liked, that we thought we would like if we listened to it. And I listened to other podcasts, and they did like a banter thing at the start. And the Arsecast does a great banter section at the start. And I would guess, I don't remember if I did it from the very first, but my thing was, let's not do the how are you, how's the weather stuff. It was kind of stilted and slow. And I didn't even want to say, I had an immediate reaction to it that I didn't even want to say, hi, how you do. I wanted to fucking cut it off.
Let's go.
I didn't even want it to be a word, like a guttural sound that says, let's go. And it evolved a bit in that I could still communicate where I was at very quickly by, there's like, if you lose, it's like, woohoo. It's like, all of a sudden, or if you just won, it's like, woo! So you can say a lot with the woohoo. But it was basically, let's not banter, lads. Let's get to the football. Now, Elliot and I have joked about it because I made a bit of a joke at one stage about how I'd been listening to the Arscast, and it was at the start of, we were starting one of our pods, and I'm like, God, they're really good at shouldn't we be better at banter, Elliot and I? So we tried to banter a bit, and it was terrible, and that was funny in itself. So we've tried to banter kind of on that theme. We've tried to banter once or twice, and it was terrible. But recently, the last pod I did with Elliot, he had pneumonia, and I thought he must be on drugs because he and I really synced. And he was on one. He was really funny, very unusual for him. So again, I thought he was on drugs, and he was just loose and funny, and it was like the Gilmore Girls, him and me, but I was whichever girl wasn't getting to talk very much, and I really enjoyed it, and it was funny, and I guess you could say banter if I could have got a word in edgeways, but we're not loose. Another part of it is we're so our emotional landscapes are totally opposite. No, not opposite. And like, excuse me, banter does not come easily when we start a podcast. A pod normally starts, like if we lose, I emotionally need to roll up in a ball for 24 hours. It's what I used to do before we had a podcast. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to be on the internets. If we win, I'm full of energy. If we lose, Elliot is like a hurricane coming towards land that accelerates and builds force. And when the game's over, half a millisecond later, it's let's go comes up in your WhatsApp. And I'm like, oh, fuck, no. And like I can feel like my body will start to collapse to one side because I can't sit. Like I'm trying to absorb, and he is charged up. He knows what he wants to say. I don't know what I want to say. I don't know what I
at that
think.
point, you don't know how you're feeling, about the game.
Yeah, I know. I feel very, very, very bad. That's what I can share with the world.
But that's why it's an instant reaction. I like it because it's an emotion. It's your what's your emotional response, not your thoughtful response, and I love when I'm traveling home from games. By the time I've got off my train, it's recorded and ready for me to listen to, and then to drive home. So it's always is that emotional response to what's going on, and
it's cool. Very interesting. Yeah, you're right. And like, what's weird about the instant reaction is that sometimes I'm saying stuff and I don't even agree with it. And I know I don't agree with it. And I'm like, well, should I take a step back and rationalize it and make it consistent with the things I've been saying for a few weeks? I'm like, well, no, I wouldn't. Even if this is totally contradictory, and sometimes I'll throw out, we'll say things like I'll probably say tomorrow, but sometimes I even see it differently at the time, but it's not what I feel. And I'm like, no, it's not, it's an overstatement to say it's not honest, but it's like, you can't do an instant reaction to a feeling you don't have at the moment that is more intellectual. You go with, like, this guy's a bum. They're all bums. Whatever it is you're feeling, you got to say it. And, you can step back towards the end of the pod and maybe couch it a bit. But at the time, you got to go with what you got.
And then you got the one the next. Well, you got the one the next day where you actually say, "Okay, we thought about it a bit and a bit more rational and stuff like that." Or you go, "No, I'm doubling down. That was shit, and this is why it was shit."
One of my all-time favorites when you guys are speaking is trying to listen to Elliot verbally. When you kind of go off, you might go on a tangent or you might speak about something that Elliot doesn't necessarily agree with, or he's trying to bring you back. It's hilarious listening to him verbally try to chase you and get you back kind of not in line, but try and get you back to the, I don't know, the format of the pod or whatever it might be. And I'm kind of at the other end of whatever my listening device is saying, no, let him go, keep going. But it does be funny.
It's like
listening.
That swordfish thing, isn't it? Like you're out deep sea fishing and you let the line go and you let him go and you let him and then he starts to fade and tar and then you start to reel him back in. I think that's what Elliot's doing with me.
Yeah. And before I pass you on to Tabs, one last question from me until later on. Other than the ArsenalVision and Arsenal in general, do you have any other interests, any other hobbies? What else do you get involved in?
Yeah, just a few. So I'm quite into meditation, Buddhism, that kind of stuff.
Very good.
I'm not Buddhist, but I'm into it. If you,
Yeah.
I'm raised Irish Catholic. Now, I have a few issues with that whole business, but
Yes.
you are what you were raised, and I study Buddhism, and but my values, like I'm the same as everybody else from Dublin who grew up in my era. Like we all see the world the same way. We all think the same things are right or right. Like at the end of the day, I'm raised at Dublin, Irish Catholic from the kind of the 70s. That's basically where I am. But I'm very much into Buddhism meditation, uh, particularly the meditation, which is weird because, um, before a game starts, I have a choice: do I meditate or not? And they put me in two very different emotional landscapes. Like there's the famous thing where we watched the Brentford game after COVID, and I said we lost the game. And I was bummed. We were all bummed. We did the instant reaction. But upon a bit of reflection, because it was the post-COVID era, I said, they were talking about Neville and Carragher dancing around, and it didn't bother me as much as it bothered other people because I'd meditated. And I made the mistake of saying, a kind of on reflection, but that was fecking brilliant as a football game.
Yeah.
With the full knowledge we had lost, and that was a pisser, and that it was the bitter part of bittersweet, that football was back, that it mattered. Like half our team was out sick with COVID. I didn't take it that we were bad. I took it that we were unlucky, but that it mattered. Like the Brentford, was that the first season that
It was the
Brentford were in the league?
It's the opening game
yeah
of the
yeah
season, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
It
Brentford
was
were
the
just
opening
back in the
game.
Premier League. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
into
look,
the Premier League
looking
first time.
back
Yeah.
on it, it was, forget the neutral. It was fecking brilliant, and we lost, and we were going to get our shit together, and we were going to be better. And I was basically saying, as miserable as this is, it matters again. And
Yeah.
you don't win all your games, and it's shit when you lose, but it's fecking brilliant. This was electric. That night was electric. Not so much for us, but
Yeah.
football mattered, right?
Yeah.
And that's the
And
problem with when I meditate before a game. So I don't do it anymore. I
but
find
I tell you,
myself.
a lot of people can take a lesson from that because there's so much vitriol and bile that's spat out on
You're right.
social
They
media.
could, but I'll tell you the one thing I've learned: they don't want a lesson.
Especially when you've been beaten, they don't want people to be cheerful. So
Yeah, I
I'm not sure
wasn't
the
trying
correct
to give
message.
them a lesson, but I couldn't get away from the fact that because I'd meditated, I was open. Like my senses were full. It wasn't the
Yeah.
result I wanted. It wasn't all but like I was.
Yeah,
Do you remember the COVID matches, whether you won
yeah.
or you?
Yeah.
It was like, great, we won.
Yeah.
Oh no, we didn't win.
There was a greater part to this rather than just Arsenal losing a football match, I think. Yeah, at that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a river flowing. The waters were overflowing the banks. They were flooding the delta. I don't know if that's a thing. The terminology may be off here, but like it mightn't be going down the route you want, but there's water and it's alive and like it's rushing and like okay, it's crushing villages along the way, but there's water. So yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm going to pass you over to Tabs for part three. And thanks so much.
Part three.
I'm absolutely loving this.
What happened to two and the back
Well,
half of
yeah,
Yeah, we
one?
just never announced part one and two. They just happened.
Okay.
it's fine. It's fine. Dinner might just be late, but that's all good. I've just messaged the wife. And interesting what you're saying about intros. Now your response to my 5 minute chat before the intro, and you just saying one thing. Now that made sense. So thank you for clarifying that. So when we go, look, in terms of so your love for Arsenal and so on. So can you remember the first game you watched, or whether it was the FA Cup you were
Yeah, it was
talking
the FA
about?
Cup
Or
final. Yeah.
okay, so what was the first game then you went to in person?
So I was living in the UK in the mid to late 80s. I went to a West Ham game, probably in 1988. And and we won, I think, 1-0. We did a lot of 1-0s around that time. And it was kind of a sensory overload, but it wasn't kind of what I expected. That was a time where football was quite intense, and like, I don't think I saw any hooliganism, but it had that vibe at that time, just generally around football, not necessarily around that game or Arsenal. So it was like I was from somewhere else, which I was, and football was, the football was more like rugby. It was like very physical, very whatever, and it was an amazing experience that I felt slightly separated from, because I was there with the mate who had got me tickets, but everybody else was different, and I remember thinking that I was a piece in a puzzle, like a jigsaw, in which I was the only piece that had a different color. It felt very different and very kind of other, and it was odd, it was intense, and we won. So there was lots of fun, there was lots of excitement. I was also probably pretty out of it because we'd been to the pub beforehand, during and after, and so it was almost like a massive culture clash. I'm like, wow. So that was my
And did it sort of then? So even though you felt, it seems like you're like on the outside looking in, sort of thing,
yeah.
or something like.
I,
Did it
it was a
hook
very
you though? Did
strong
you think,
football.
I want this, again. I want more of this. Did it sort of grab you instantly, or was it a slow burner?
It was more, this is something I'm going to take in doses over time, because I wasn't about to become. The thing about that is you need to become part of it. And I realized how far from being part of the live match day experience, like these people, they went to the pubs, they all knew, like, there was just, and there was a separation there. And there was I was living in the Midlands, so it wasn't like I was going to be hanging around there. I realized that while when you watch something on TV, you're like everybody else watching it on TV. I couldn't just. It would have been a real effort to convince me I was part of this thing that I could only visit on occasion from another place, drop in there, and so yeah, that's that's.
But
I said I was going to
now,
be brutally honest. I don't want to rewrite that
no,
there was this
no,
magical thing.
Yeah,
That's
that's what
how
we
it
want.
was.
Yeah,
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 it was
that's fine.
parochial. It was like going to
I
a
mean,
different country,
yeah.
and they spoke a different language, and they behaved like I was not. I was not these guys. Arsenal was much more local then, right? It
Yeah.
was very much about the people from that place, from that time, in that culture, and I was very different to that culture. And like it was great and it was amazing and stuff, but I didn't suddenly fuse into it, and it was part of this romantic journey that my biggest connection, where I felt most connected with Arsenal and part, was when the social media and Arsenal, and I could be part of what was going on and know what there were a lot of these players I didn't have that much knowledge of when I went to see them, because again, you still couldn't watch games on TV, right? Snippets of matches, it was shit. They did a massive disservice to connecting anybody who wasn't local to the team, to the sport, to the. So I'm just going to be honest. I didn't fully get this connection to the club till probably lots of people who are listening to this got this connection, despite the fact I started in the 70s and all the stuff that went, like, I just didn't. It wasn't until they opened up the Premier League properly and they started televising stuff, and it was a little slower in the US, and there was the social media stuff and Twitter. Twitter was my jam. That was when I just fell into it and fell in, all the content, everything, training videos. I had this concept that they should have a membership, and like a ticket membership and stuff, and there should be levels, and it should, like, towards the extreme, there should be a membership that costs you £100,000 a year, but you got to shower with the lads twice in the season. You couldn't talk to them. You shouldn't talk to them, but you'd be there swapping the shampoo, the soap, and you're in there with Chesney. It's where Chesney is
Because
around
you
the
have the
corner.
cigarette with
Passing him a cigarette. Yeah.
So like, and you and there'd be like two guys per match. You'd be in the pool after, you'd have to shut up. Like there'd be security. You have to shut up, but you could sit there with the lads and kind of. I just wanted all the access. There wasn't enough access for me because
But
now I could connect and now I could talk to other people about it, and I was part of something.
Yeah, look, everyone has their own different journey to supporting Arsenal and the intensity and stuff like that, and that's what makes it great. And I think that's what the Arsenal Vision podcast represent, is that massive community. Is we all have one thing in common, but how we got there is all very different. So you'll have your person that's been a season ticket since year dot, and you got the likes of Tim, home and away, historian and stuff like that. You got myself, Ian, season ticket holders. I mean, Ian comes over from Ireland every home game to come and watch, and me, I'm an hour and a half down the road. You've got people who live nearby, part of a friendship group. You've got people who travel down from Scotland, from the West Country, from everywhere, to people who are just always abroad, will never be able to get to the Emirates, and they sort of live vicariously through others, and there's no one way
fantastic.
to support Arsenal. And again, what you do, what we try and do is just help give a sense of that to people, and if they get to go, that's fantastic. If they don't, then we try and bring some of that feeling, as well as discussing the highs and lows and whatnot of the game. So it's great to hear how different people get into it. So with that,
can I say, I always dread when it's like tell us your story, because I'm like, it's not a great, mine isn't a great story, but it's my story. And like, it really all starts again in this kind of more modern era, where now I feel all connected to everybody. I've ways of sharing it. I've ways to talk about it. I've ways to express my feelings. There's all the content, all the things that you can be an obsessed, absorbed supporter and share your feelings. And like, I built friendships that turned into real friendships through the community around Arsenal. So it's very, very different. In my case, since probably about 2008, 2009, 2010 was when it really got going for me. And I could really connect to the club, because you can't just connect to the club without connecting to other people. And
very well said.
It's the community, as you talk about and on the podcast all the time. That's the big part of it, and you feel now part of something, and I think that's great. So with that, in terms of your Arsenal supporting journey and how you got to and where you are now, what's your best Arsenal memory that you can remember, either in person, on TV, whatever, anything related to Arsenal? What would you say is your best Arsenal memory?
The Barcelona game with the Arshavin goal. I mean, you had to peel me off the ceiling. I don't know that it was the best moment in all the years and all the time, but like, it's just such an easy answer. It was Barcelona. It was at a time where they were the best, the greatest, and we had one heck of a game and like, we really started to play as the second half went on, and we cut through them like butter, and it was just absolutely, I never lost my mind more than that. It was just
fantastic. Yeah. And let's hope we can repeat that against Real Madrid in the coming weeks. So and the opposite of that, what is your worst Arsenal memory?
Probably, and I think I'm layering on what followed it, but the Eduardo leg break, it
was awful.
Just had that. It just hit you in the stomach, and it dragged you down, and you just felt like you could see the impact it had on the team. I mean, I think we did that wrong as a club, and as a team, I think there was a massive immaturity in the squad, and it played out through that. But that was just such a downer at the time, and from there on in, we never and it was like an incident, but also a period that was maybe defining and had echoes in follow-on seasons even. Sometimes the input, I think in some ways we kind of did it to ourselves, it's in terms of the
Well,
mentality that
it
we.
doesn't.
Yeah,
It doesn't help when Gallas sits on the side of
yeah,
the pitch when there's a penalty against you. What sort of message does that send
yeah,
across? You have bad luck, but you just got to get on with it and
yeah,
fight on. So yeah, no, we were on for winning the league that
yeah.
year, and it just all fell
We were
apart
so
just from that.
great. It was such a brilliant story, and
Yeah.
then this terrible, ugly incident, and then
Mm.
I think we psychologically compounded it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that got well within our heads, the Eduardo incident, and it did become a thing. It was around the time everybody was talking about, Arsenal don't like it up them and all this kind of thing, and we played up to that a little bit, I suppose, as fans and as a club. But yeah, what a player Eduardo was as well. Such a shame his career went that way. It
And
was
we
it
were
was
so
horrible.
brilliant.
Yeah, the
Some
team
the
were great.
football, and like I guess there was a little bit of a fragility there, one way or another. It was a young
Yeah.
team, and
Yeah. So talking of quality players, have you got a favorite player of all time for Arsenal? Who would you say is your favorite player of all time at Arsenal?
uh, probably two. My emotional connection to the greatest player of all time would be Liam Brady. Just absolute flair player. Now I didn't see that many games, so it's one of those things. But just emotion. He was brilliant, and it was kind of the later 70s. He had the hair. It was the vibe. He was a great player. They were terrible pitches, so there was only so much you could do with the ball. But he was a great player. He was Irish, obviously. He was Dubliner, and so that was the first great player. And then Thierry Henry, obviously. And what do you say about Thierry Henry that hasn't already been said? Absolutely nothing. Um, I mean, at his most physical, strongest, best, fastest, he was the Premier League. And to think of all the great players who've been and gone, and let's be honest, nobody has done. It doesn't matter who racks up the numbers. Like Erling Haaland can rack up, uh, Thierry Henry was the embodiment, the most full version of manhood. He was an Adonis, right? In a way, doesn't matter what Erling Haaland does, doesn't matter how many goals he scores. He'll never be the player Henry was. He'll never be the force. He'll never be the presence. Um, and how many players can you imagine Arsenal having where most of the world doesn't really argue with you? Most of
Mm.
the Premier
Yeah,
League, they might quibble, but it's like this guy's like Rooney could have been that player. He was an absolutely incredible player, but I would say maybe his mental flaws would prevent him achieving somewhat similar levels. I mean, he never got close, but uh, if you were to think of somebody who could have got into that space, maybe it was Rooney, but nobody got close to him because Thierry Henry not only could, he did, and he did it for years in, years out. And he let the world know. That was the thing about him. He let the world know he was better than everybody else on the pitch.
yeah,
Uh,
Do
yeah.
you think
He had that
do you
aura.
think it was under? Do you think it was underappreciated, or there was something I think Tim said in column this week or something like that he's making sure that he enjoys the good players we have now because you sort of forget. So a bit like Thierry Henry, we may take him for granted at the time, and you forget. Oh my God, this guy is just a god on a football pitch. So do you
for
feel like
sure.
Thierry Henry may have fallen into that trap? You're so used to his brilliance that it
Yeah.
becomes normal and you don't appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think everything changed after Twitter 2009, like the access, the connection. Like Thierry Henry was brilliant when you got to see him. Our currently brilliant players are brilliant because you can see them all. If they're brilliant, you see them all the time, and you know them on and off the pitch, and you can watch and there's all this access to media, and you can go back and watch stuff, and there's all the stuff on YouTube, and you can just bathe yourself in ass's milk if there's a
Mm.
great player. Strangely, there aren't any great players at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Whose ass's milk do you want to be bathed in right now?
I wasn't
Um,
expecting that question to be asked.
Me neither. I think one of the things I was asking you what kind of things you were going to ask me, and you mentioned something about where my analogies come from, and like my thing is, I, you know, do I plan them or not? I'm like one or two of them I do, but probably more often than not, I start something and then I get a bit nervous because I've no idea how to get back
Where
to
it's
dry
going.
land.
Where's
Whether
it
this
going?
makes
Where am
any
I going
sense.
with this?
Yeah, and like
Brilliant.
some days my words don't come, and I'm like stuck halfway through. I'm like, oh Jesus Christ! I knew this was a bad idea before I started. I thought it might be funny, but even I suspected this was not going to be amusing. And Elliot normally bails me out by taking the piss
Well,
out of me, making it funny, and then we move on.
yeah, I was about to say he must know you well enough by now that okay, he's lost it, and you're going.
Yeah,
Help me out.
Help me
pull
out
the
here.
whipcord. Yeah.
Well, okay, and that nicely moves on to like the final sort of part of the show
What?
is like
The final bit?
what?
What happened to the
Huh?
middle bit in the?
That was the middle bit. That was the middle of
Okay.
the Arsenal we do. Sorry, I
I,
think
I got you mixed
we're
up. I said part 3. I meant to say part 2 earlier on. Sorry.
yeah. Ignore Ian. He's an amateur. No, sorry. Yeah. So actually, talking about that, do you have a sort of so now do you because you're doing the podcast and obviously have to provide opinions and you
Uh-huh.
want to provide sort of meaningful or thoughtful stuff, ignoring the emotional stuff, but do you find that you watch games differently now? Are you taking notes? How has that changed the
Yeah,
way you're
totally
viewing
differently.
it? Yeah, and also you got Clive who just imparts so much footballing knowledge and us all that you think, oh god, I never realised that. So yeah, go on, tell us
Yeah.
how is it different for you?
Well, yeah. Well, Clive hasn't changed my view of football at all. I don't know what he's talking about. It sounds lovely. I let it wash over me. He's kind of a philosopher podcaster. I'm like, I probably should try and understand that because I'd understand the game. But in a way, and like there was a while I thought it was my job to know. I was on a podcast. Like my bio on Twitter now is what is it? I'm not a
Plays at
football.
being a podcaster. Is it
Yeah,
you
no,
say you
I'm
play
not a
at being a
football.
podcaster?
I'm not a football expert. I just play one on a podcast. And I
Yeah.
think there was a while I thought it was your job to know more about football than the people listening. And I kind of thought I should be. And I am into analytics and stuff. Hence the joke about Stats Guy and a Civilian, that other podcast we sometimes do,
Yeah.
where I pretend where I have an actual stats guy on there, but in my inflated view of myself, I think I'm the stats guy. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in analytics and that kind of stuff, but I don't have any basis in it, and I'm just an ordinary guy who likes foot. And it took me a while to realize that probably people don't want me to try and be smarter than them about football, and I'm not. So maybe I should just enjoy football the way I do. So, and talk about football the way I see it. And so, yeah, doing the podcast as I don't know if I'm different in terms of how I understand football, but I watch matches totally different because I've got the problem is I don't have a podcast to do the next day, which would be fine. I used to do when that was the case. I watched the game for enjoyment and then I watched it again, which I would have done anyway to analyze it. Because I was always everybody's into I rewatched the game. Well, that was not a thing really back in the day when we first started podcasting because I was always saying, look, I watched the game again and I see it differently. This player, might be about Jacques or something like. I think we missed what was going on there, why we did it, and it was a difficult dynamic in the show because nobody else was watching it again, and the pushback from people, from Elliot or whoever on the podcast, whether explicit or implicit, was that's not a good idea watching it again. And because it's a different, you go looking for things, right? It's almost like bias confirmation. And look, that is a thing. And I have done some of that where I go and watch a particular player and I'm like, that doesn't match with how I felt about it. Let me prove to myself. Now, sometimes you saw it. So it was a but now I think it's very accepted that it's a good process. But it wasn't accepted process back there. It wasn't kind of best practice to watch the game again. Now it's absolutely, and it's a skill, right? Because you have to offset. Skill is a strong word, but you learn to watch it a second time without over leaning into your biases. And so, it totally changes how I watch the game now, because we've got to do the instant reaction straight after. I don't like saying things that I think it's great that it's emotional, it's how you feel, but I don't like it to be bad and stupid, especially if I'm going to be critical and I look at it again, I'm like, that's bad and you can't take it back. So,
are you taking notes? Do you take notes during the game?
Yeah. Let me grab.
Yeah.
So, like, every game, I draw a line for my 90 minutes, and I got my incidents off it, and I'm making who scored, who assisted. Okay, that's obvious, but every attacking or defensive moment, and you go along the timeline, and it allows me to say, well, first 15 minutes, we were pressing, we were at it. I kind of have a framework of what I look for over 90 minutes. Do we start fast? Do we press? Arteta has his basics, which is, both the B stands for, both boxes, etc. So I kind of have a few frameworks to make sure I step back from the game and kind of get at least an overall picture. And then the other half of it is how you feel, how organically it was. But it absolutely changes it from watching the game to, I don't know if I ever enjoyed watching Arsenal, right? I'm extremely engaged. You enjoy it when you're thrashing somebody. When else do you enjoy it? You have highs, you have euphoric moments. But if you have euphoria, the other side's waiting for you. Like, you always feel you've won the game, and the players do when they score a goal. It's like 10 minutes in, we score a goal, and it's like, why are you being euphoric? You've got 80 minutes to go, and they're going to score a goal on the counter because it's 2014 and you're playing Swansea, and they always score on the counter, and it ends up a draw. And but even that team was euphoric when they scored in the first 10 minutes. And so your world collapses into this moment of euphoria. But when are you happy? You're probably happy for about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes till the game settles down and you begin to see that if things don't play out and the next goal isn't coming, and then you've 2 goals. It's like, 2-0 up and it's 25 minutes in. We'll never lose from here. And then you have that. The game settles into a pattern, and then they've got possession. You're like, fuck, if they score before halftime, or if they get a quick one out, how long are you happy? How long do you enjoy a football game?
I think you need to meditate. I think you need to chill.
Yeah. So enjoyment is when you trash somebody.
Yeah, I think when we score. Yeah, I think when you score, it's like, we've got less chance of losing now. It's just how the more times we score, the less chance we have of losing. So again, that balances the scale. So that's where the happiness sort of comes in. So okay, I'm a bit more content. I'm still not 100%, but look, when I'm at home, I've got this notepad and it's like full of notes. And then at the games, I used to take loads of notes, and now it's just more reminders. And in terms of watching the game back, it's more to remind myself of actually what happened, because if we talk about, me and Ian talk about it, I want to make sure we're.
So did you start this before the pod?
No, as part of the pod. No, I only did it as. I used to enjoy watching football before the pod.
I know. Now you got to have opinions.
I had an opinion, but don't worry about it. I didn't have to tell anyone about it. But so I've changed in terms of. I'm sort of okay, and maybe a bit more analytical, and maybe a bit more an understanding and awareness, rather than letting it just sweep over me. And now I sort of back my opinions up with fact, rather than it just being, I feel this. Well, why do I feel this? Oh, is that based in some sort of evidence, or is it just an emotional thing? And actually, no. If you look at it, actually, that's not quite right, sort of thing. So I sort of changed it from that point of view. But
no, it changes it massively. I think how you watch a game.
Yeah,
and not always for the best.
So you were talking about the current team. So let's just have a look. How do you feel about this current team? Like, who's your favorite player, and what are your thoughts on the season so far? If you want to include context. If you don't.
It's a process. I think the challenge for us, we all know it, is the time frame. Like if you zoom out and you say, where are we at in our journey? It's not always linear. I'm sure we have all said that or thought that. Looking at
Yeah.
the next season, you're always like people are very critical of the summer window that we've just been through. But there's another argument that says, well, we strengthened and we were really good last year, and we got 89 points, and we're just 2 points off, and we won 16 of the last 18, drew one and lost one, which is incredible. So in fact, take the last half of last season, that team, that squad, and then you add some additional capabilities. Even if you think we left some stones unturned, we got better, and we're worse this season. And then you get into the context and the injuries and the this and the that and the other. But it's not always linear. It is a process. And sometimes being better isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be the size of the jump forward. There are certain things that are going to go against you, certain stasis. Like if you went into the next team with the next season with the same the same squad, the same team, and you'd had a really good season before, there's a reversion to the mean where there's something not as fresh, the things don't go for you quite as well. So the reminder to myself is it's not enough to go up a half step. You got to go up a full step, you got to nail windows. We need more brilliant players, which is kind of a cheat, right?
Simple solution.
Yeah. But if we are to look back on a great team, if we look back on the 2004 team, we had a couple of great players. We had one world class in his prime players. We had Dennis Bergkamp, who was absolutely world class. He was probably slightly post prime, but still a real force. But it wasn't his prime. We had an absolute world class player, arguably the best player in the world. And it's hard to be a great team as opposed to a really good team. If you look at City, right, they don't really have any absolutely incredibly brilliant players at the moment. And I don't know that they'd be remembered as a brilliant, great team. His Barcelona team is still, Pep's Barcelona team had Messi. It had Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi, Dani Alves, and a few more. But it had four incredibly brilliant players. And we need a brilliant player. And I don't think we have that yet. There's not many of them about.
Yeah,
No.
we're not far off. I fully agree. We just need a couple of
as a team, as a
superstars.
squad, as a project. It's fantastic, but we need that's why I think at the end of the day, you get it. If you think Isaac is a brilliant player, I think this isn't normally me, but I think you get to a point where your team's really, really good. But the difference between whether you push on or not, why is Liverpool winning the league? Mo Salah, right? Other players too, and the overall level, and maybe they'd have won it without him. But why are they a brilliant team when they're a brilliant team? Because they have one player who's brilliant and he pulls everybody up towards him, right? And
with Man City, you had Haaland and Rodri. They have those kind of superstars. Yeah,
they do. And their overall level is just so high because because everybody's 50 million, 60 million, 70 million, or they had some funky deal, So that's a cheat code for the rest of us who are not going to have a level of team where everybody in the backup is at a certain level. You're going to need one brilliant player to be brilliant.
And okay, so with that in mind, what would be your dream summer transfer if you could get? When I say dream, as in realistically dream summer transfer?
Isak, I think he's the player
He's the one.
that. Yeah, because I know we're looking at Sheshko or Sesko. I don't want him because we'll never agree how to pronounce his name, and Sheshko is really annoying, or Shesko or Seshko. Really
We all
fucking
turn
annoying.
into mini Sean Connerys.
Yeah,
That's what happens.
I only want him joining if we all agree we're going to call him Sesko. He spelt it. It's simple. It's not annoying. It's annoying for him and his family, but we're going to call him Sesko.
Yeah. We have to
I
go,
don't
or
know
we
if
could just go with Benjamin then. Another Ben.
yeah.
Well,
But he's kind of what Isaac gives you is the fluidity, the movement, the creativity that's more exciting to my view of what this team can be. And he's a worldie, I think. Now, can he stay fit? Probably if he goes to another club, possibly not if he came to us. He'd be a ridiculously expensive, but really he's the price of a great player plus a very good player rolled together, and I think that's something you do.
So with that, and sort of quickly, but just before we finish now, so would you? So and I posed this question for another podcast. Would you forego getting Sesko, Ben, whatever you want to call him, or
See
any
what
other
I mean?
striker?
This is why we're not going in for him.
Yeah. So would you, because it feels like that's almost a done deal. Would you forego getting an early deal to chase Isak, knowing that it may be only 50-50, or do you get in some strikers and you just have to say, sorry, we can't be faffing around waiting for Isak?
I think you go for Isak. Life's a gamble. Brilliant teams are not a given. They require extraordinary players, and that requires. How many times in the history of football have you looked at the price of a player and thought that's of a great player that people were chasing and thought that's absolutely bananas? And now this is survivor bias because you're going to the great players. There was a time when their fee was ridiculous, and you looked back on it afterwards, and you're like, no, that was fair. Right. Now, there are many other, it is survivor bias because there are many other players who were supposed to be great. You spent all your money on them and they didn't pan out. So there's plenty of those. But in the scenario in which we have a great team who does it all and wins it all, we're going to need a great player. And Sesko is a very good player.
Yeah.
So
That's the difference. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. And the final question, as we ask all guests, and it's a one-word answer. What do you think of Tottenham?
Shit.
Sorry. I thought you might have said pitiful, given your answer beforehand. But anyway, that's okay. Look, that's it. I think we've come to the end of that. I mean, we could be here all day, to be honest, talking. I feel like, I think Ian would also say the same. We could be here all day, but my wife and kids are going to go hungry if I carry on. So unfortunately, we're going to have to.
You know what I say?
Call,
you know what I say? Fuck them. Let's keep going.
Let them go hungry.
Fuck them.
I will let her know you pass on your regards.
Yeah, send her my love, but also fuck them.
Well, look, it's a pleasure, and yeah, it's been really fun having you on. So, where can people find you? And then we're not talking about your home address on the socials. What's your handle? If people don't know already,
about a mile north of Wrigleyville. No, at Poznan in my pants, basically. And
okay.
Arsenal V podcast is our podcast. So.
Okay, sure. Look, I'm sure everyone listening to this would have heard Pos before and knows where to find him. But if not, well, go and follow those. And Ian, where can people find you and tell them what you do?
People can find me at Art Cannon Pics on all the different social media platforms. Send me in a picture of your Canon. I'm heading towards 600 Canons at this point. As I said in the last pod, I've 6. of the 7 continents covered. I need somebody to go to Antarctica to make one out of snow, take a picture of it, and send it back to me. But that's where you'll find me. And I just wanted to say again, as like you said, Tabs, thank you so much, Paz, for coming on. It's been
Has
fantastic
anybody
getting you.
gone to the Tottenham Hotspur toilet bowl and formed a turd into a cannon and sent you a picture of that?
No, but I really, really
If
hope
not,
someone does.
why not?
We need to get that out there. That we're going to have to
Oh,
clip that
God.
up and get people into some Arsenal fans into the Tottenham.
It's been a special request.
Paul said you have to
if
do
I,
it.
if I manage to get a ticket for the NFL, because I won't be getting an away ticket next season, I can't even believe I'm saying this. I'm not even going. Shut up.
You've broken Tabs, Paul.
Oh
No,
my God.
but fair play.
It
And
seems
look,
to be a regular.
yeah, and just
Go
to
on.
say, finally for me, just say thank you so much for everything that you guys do on the Arsenal Vision podcast. It's a staple of my my kind of Arsenal podcast listening. So thank you so much.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks
Indeed.
to
And
you
once you
guys.
listen
Thanks
to
to
them,
everybody listening who listens to us and any future listeners. Yeah, we do it because we
yeah.
love it.
No, indeed. I think that's why everyone does it. So look, you can follow the Grove at the Grove AFC on Threads and Blue Sky. And as I said, we can now add Pos to our really good back catalogue of meeting Arsenal in the community, which I said Elliot Smith from Arsenal Vision, Ask Cannon Picks, Ian, she wore North Banksy, which was a cool one, and Gooner Dave, actually, they're all cool. We're looking to get others, and Pos may be asking you as a wee favour after the pod goes out. But that's about it. So look, thank you everyone again. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Pos, Paul, for joining us, and we'll be back. Indeed, woohoo, indeed, and we'll be back with a Fulham preview and a bit of a look at the international break before the end of the week. So there we go. So as always, until the next time, come on, you Gunners.